Wow, half of our team is here. Holy mackerel! Good morning.
Good to see you, Bill. This is George.
Hey George. Good morning. Good morning. I see Bill Jackson's here and Lena's here, and well, Noah was not going to be here for about 10 minutes or so, so we'll have to be kind of patient. How y'all doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Good. Good. Me too. Me too. We're going to talk about it with Noah a little bit, but what an incredible experience I think we all had at this meeting in Dallas for the American Thoracic Society. I wish everybody could have been there. It was really interesting. Tammy, I can't see you, but I know you're there.
Hi, Bill. This is John, Elena's husband.
Hi, how you doing, Josh? How are you?
Morning. Good. Okay.
Good, good, good. This stuff it actually works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We'll probably have I don't know 40, 50 people on our call this morning. We're a little bit early. I just got on to kind of kick the tires and make sure everything's working okay, which I think it is.
That's what I was doing too.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing. Hey, nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
Yeah. I see. We're getting a great picture of Bill Jackson's chair. I'm not sure if you can all see that or not. And I'll walk through the mechanics of how to use this once we actually start the meeting. But we'll have if you see little pictures at the top of your screen above my picture that I'm talking, we'll have 40 or 50 people like that, little snapshot pictures. But what's nice about it is that you can actually interact and talk. So when Noah comes on, I'll do a short introduction, and then we're off and running.
Okay.
But we can take we. Oh, good, Doctor Walensky. Ed, you're here. I'm so glad you made this.
Well,
Good morning. Good morning. I got your note. I responded. At some point, I'd like to spend some time with you, kind of talking about the ketogenic diet, because I just attended ATS here in Dallas and had the opportunity to meet with several key opinion leaders, physicians, and pulmonologists and researchers about the ketogenic diet specifically as it impacts pulmonary fibrosis. And the one that I would love you to talk to is Dan Rose. And Dan was the co-founder of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation. He's a masters athlete competitor. He's 78. He is the national winner in the downhill skiing event and bicycling. But he's a strict adherent of the ketogenic diet and evangelizes it. I'd love you two to talk.
I sure like to.
Okay.
Johnny,
Yes.
can you see it?
Yeah.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Bill. Good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm okay. I get up kind of funky, so excuse me.
Well, that's okay.
It's 8 o'clock over here.
Listen, any time we can simply get up, face the sunshine of the day, and be on this side of the grass is a good day.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. I'm going to mute everybody, so you can't talk for a second. I'm going to explain what and why I'm doing that. Noah's joined us, and I know once you find out he's here, he will be inundated with messages and conversation, and I'd rather I'd rather keep him and I in a kind of a we can talk now back and forth to each other. But I cannot describe to you, which I'll talk about later again, but how thrilled I am to have him here. He's really my go-to guy for questions I have about living with IPF or any lung disease. But he's just absolutely phenomenal.
Good morning.
Morning, only you and I can talk. Because you know what? If I had everyone else turned on, you would be overwhelmed and inundated with messages before we begin. We're not going to start for about 6 minutes.
That's what we're here for.
We are here for, yes.
We're here for. So.
I was just talking kind of to the people who are here so far. I think we have about 14 or 15 people now early on the call about what I saw at ATS was example. I had the opportunity, as you did, to talk to the leading doctors, pulmonologists, researchers in the world. And
yeah.
It's been just absolutely impactful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what you're doing, Noah, and I've said this a little bit before you joined the call, just the small group we have right now, is it's just overwhelmingly positive. It's an opportunity for people to share wisdom, information, inspiration that you have that nobody else has. And it's interesting to me that I've talked to people around the world, and you are a worldwide a celebrity, essentially, in this whole field.
Well, as it should be. No, I'm just kidding.
Should be. I love your modesty.
It took me 25 years, so I expected it a much longer time ago. But no, I'm just kidding. But it's I think that I just do what I do, and
you know what you give without expectations of returns, which is I love that. I mean, I really mean that.
The thing is that I've been given a lot, so it's like even what I do, like people think it's what I do. It's not really what I choose to do. I don't have a choice to do it. I was given a gift, and whatever you believe in, whether that comes from God or the universe or just dumb luck, somehow I'm able to do things that others aren't, and so I feel like it's my mission and my responsibility to share it. Like I feel like it's been given to me for a reason, and it's natural to me. It's natural. Like I never feel like I'm.
I hit the wrong button here and I muted you. I apologize.
That's okay.
There we go. I turned it back on again. I'm sorry.
Yep. No, it's just like I said, it's done more for me than I've done for it and for others. So I'm very grateful for that. So I've been given a gift, and when you're given a gift, it's like if you're a great dancer, you owe it to the world to dance. So I've been given a really good one because it helps people breathe better and live better lives. So that's better than dancing.
That's right.
I am a gifted dancer. No.
I'll bet you are, actually. I wish some of the people here could have been at the show because they'd have taken action in the real you, which I noticed I was sitting talking to several doctors, and all of a sudden somebody comes up behind me, picks me up, lifts me off the ground, and twirls me around like I'm a toy top. And I look over my shoulder, and guess who was there?
Who was it? The thing is, for me, like when it comes to life and, things like, to me, the value or the characteristic trait that I value most in people is authenticity. For better or for worse. It's like I think it's really important that you find your voice and find out your mission in life and find out what you're supposed to be doing with yourself. And I think, unfortunately, too many people don't ever find this, because of societal or family or social or structural or, cultural reasons. And, I think it's important that we really drink up every drop of life that we're given.
I have no idea what that was.
Anyway, give me one moment. I will be right back, and then we can start. For those that are here already, I just want to say that I have a webinar that it's not a webinar, it's actually a presentation that I did in Dallas a couple of years ago, and I hope that most of you have seen it, because I said to Bill, rather than kind of repeat the same thing that is readily available, it's an almost 3-hour webinar presentation, I really want to make this a personal value for you today, and you know, not tell you things that I've said 500 times that you could look up, and you know, things that, but I want to really address burning questions that you have, and things that we can really help you to you know, really implement today. So give me one moment and I will be right back. All right, let's do it.
Wait 1 second, Noah. I've got to do one little thing here. Bear with me, please.
Yep. Yep.
He's got your hat.
We're doing a really interesting test, Noah. And
Are you seeing if Shelly can walk and walk around the house and watch the webinar at the same time? Shelly, look out! There's stairs. There's stairs, Shelly. Look out! All right, I'll be right back.
All right, give me 1 second here.
He's the organizer, right? That's Dick.
Yes.
Yes.
Safety and camera.
Doors and
Right. Ready when you are.
Make sure you're live and we're well.
Bill, how come we all look like we're in the 1950s and you have like this Hollywood glow on your Zoom? I think
It's all prior planning, Noah. It's all
yeah, I
prior
can
planning.
tell you've kind of got some filter on that's like the James Dean filter.
I wish it was. Actually, what we're talking right now, and I'd like to say welcome to everybody here. This is going to be an exciting presentation. We're doing a couple of things. First is, it's just having the joy and luxury of having Noah Greenspan talk with us. In itself is rewarding. Secondly, we're doing something very special. To my knowledge, this is probably the first time that a Zoom meeting like this is also correspondingly at the same time working as a Facebook Live meeting. So if you're on our Facebook page for PF Warriors, our private group, you're watching exactly what you're seeing here on your screen. And to my knowledge, it's the first time it's been done like this. So I'm very excited by that because, as Noah knows, Facebook Live is a tremendous vehicle, as is Zoom. So let me introduce, if I can, Noah Greenspan. Noah's been a friend of mine since, I think, my second year or so of diagnosis. That was, what, 6 years ago. And he graciously had me participate in one of his many YouTube videos. And I'm not sure how many YouTube videos you have now, Noah, but my guess is it's in the high 20s, 30s, whatever.
No.
It's a number. How many?
No. It's in the hundreds.
In the hundreds.
Well,
Wow.
on our YouTube page, we have 44, but we have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of Vimeo, and, you know, we're storing a lot of our stuff. It's just hundreds. I mean, and Facebook Live, and we're storing them all on our Vimeo. So I do it almost every day. I broadcast something every day almost.
Well, I'm going to talk a bit. I'm going to ask everybody that's here right now, if you would, you'll look on your screen, just a little housekeeping. In the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a series of little icons, and one of them on the left-hand side should say mute, and the other says stop video. I'd like you all to click on the one that says mute if it's not muted, and that turns your audio off, and you can also turn it on. So when you want to raise a question to Noah, you can turn your mute button on. You can also raise your hand. If you see a little button down there that says chat, if you click on chat, that'll bring up a window on the side of your screen where you can raise your hand, you can answer questions, you can get messages from other participants or myself.
Bill,
But right now, I'd like to definitely please mute your...
Can you make me a co-host so that I can also help you manage that side a little bit?
Can, and you know, I'm going to have to look how to do that. And
Just go to my name and you'll have options. It'll say other, like in the participants.
Yeah, I'm there. Hold on a second here.
Okay,
Yeah,
put it on
make me a
mute.
co-host.
And he said something about you can chat.
All right, there we go.
Elena's not muted.
Gotcha.
Am I
Elena,
muted?
mute your
I'm not muted?
please, on the bottom left-hand corner.
Okay, I got you, Elena. You're good. Okay, so now I can mute all. So
You
okay,
can mute all, yes. Don't mute me, please.
I'll reserve that for special situations.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyhow, we're going to have Noah, and if you have not seen the video that he did of his presentation in Dallas a year ago, it was incredible. We had about 60 or 70 of our warriors in a room, and he came in to speak for an hour. And when he was done, he said, now, are there any more questions? He was then there for about another 2 hours. And lively discussion, exciting discussions. And I'm going to take that video, which I have archived, and I'll place it back on our PF Warriors website so you can kind of revisit that meeting and see what was discussed then, because since then, so much has happened. And Noah, I know you're going to talk about your materials you're doing online, your pulmonary wellness promotions, and you got so much. So I'm gonna kind of keep quiet if I can, which is hard to do sometimes. And Noah, you're on.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So thank you, Bill, for having me again. So guys, really, like I said, you know, my material is out there. So like Bill said, there's a 3-hour webinar, which is kind of the soup to nuts of, you know, of what you need to know about living well with pulmonary disease. But somebody can tell you something and they can even talk for 3 hours. And at the end of it, you can kind of say, well, what does that have to do with me? So the thing is that when you say, what does that have to do with me? There are other people saying, well, the things that do have to do with you also have to do with them. So if you have a question about something and you feel like, hey, this has not really been addressed anywhere, by all means ask it, because probably other people have the same question. I've been doing this for a long time, 27 plus years, specifically with cardiopulmonary patients. Can we turn it so that bell doesn't go off every time someone comes into the room? I think we could do that. But the idea is that, you know, I started treating pulmonary fibrosis patients in 1995 when we didn't even really know what it was. And patients would come in and their oxygen would be 90% at rest if they were lucky. And then they'd stand up and their oxygen would be 80%. And then they'd start walking and their oxygen would be 70%. And so essentially patients were, you know, eliminated from rehab. They were disqualified from rehab because they were told they were too sick. So that's like, if you are it's like saying you're too poor for welfare. So it's like, if you're too sick for rehab, what does that really tell you other than go home and die, right? Because there's nothing else we could do for you. Except that didn't sit well with my mentor, Dr. Horatio Pineda, and I. So I asked him if we could, even if we don't get paid for it, start to take some of these patients as pro bono patients and figure out how we can deliver enough oxygen to get something going. And we started experimenting with masks and different flows. And, you know, we were giving sometimes people 15 or 20 liters per minute via mask, which is essentially 100% oxygen. And what we found is that we started to be able to keep people saturated, both at rest, certainly, and also during exercise. And then, you know, a lot of times people get confused and they think that the medication, whether it be the antifibrotics or the inhaled medications, or even the oxygen, they think that that's the treatment. And I don't view those as the treatment as much as I view those as the bridge to get you to the lifestyle that is going to actually make your life better. Because so often, of course, the disease is serious, okay? It's a big current that we're swimming against. Someone, if you could turn your speaker off, please. Someone's not muted. But the idea is that these things will help you to exercise more. So a lot of times we'll see people and how they feel is very different than how they felt the last time we saw them. So in other words, they're breathing worse, but their pulmonary function test is unchanged, or they're breathing better, but their pulmonary function test is unchanged. So if I could tell you one message that's more important than anything else, what that tells you is that there absolutely have to be other things besides just pulmonary function and just disease state that determine how well or how poorly we breathe. So I'm not saying that the disease does nothing, but a lot of times what happens is when people start to get short of breath, they start to make these lifestyle adaptations that work in their favor and rather work against them, meaning that they stop doing the activities that cause them shortness of breath, because people say, don't do those things, or they say, well, if your oxygen goes down, stop and rest. And then we see this downward spiral, but I actually take it from a different perspective, which is I will give you whatever oxygen dosage you need. And I know it's different in the home. Okay, you don't have the same luxuries that we have in a rehab center, but the idea is by hook or by crook, by any means necessary, we want to get you to reverse the lifestyle changes. And then symptoms can change and improve even if your pulmonary function does not improve, and even if your disease state doesn't improve. So that's really important. And I think a lot of times, you know, you have to think of this disease. It's a big disease, it's a powerful disease, and it's like swimming against the current, okay? If you stand and do nothing, you're definitely gonna get swept away from the current much more quickly than if you fight the disease, okay? And my feeling is, you know what? I may go down, okay? But if I go down, I'm going to go down fighting tooth and nail for every last breath that I can take. And I'm going to not just be satisfied with having the breath. I want it to be a good breath. I want it to be a happy breath. I want it to be a positive breath. I want to live my life. And too often, when you're diagnosed with a chronic pulmonary disease or any chronic disease, you become this unifocal kind of monochromatic version of yourself, right? So you become seen through the eyes of the disease. So the medical system says, oh, my PF patient in room 37, or so on and so forth. And family starts to see you as the patient, and even worse, the victim. And very often we can start to see ourselves as the patient or the victim, right? And that's a very dangerous place to be, because now you're helping the tide, right? You're helping the current sweep you away. And so what I say is there's two parts to this, well, many parts to it, but it's becoming educated, taking action, and equal to taking action is overcoming your resistance, and sometimes the resistance of the medical community, okay? One of the things that was shocking to me in ATS, I had always believed they say that less than 2% of people who need rehab actually get rehab. And I mean, we talk about why is that, okay? People don't refer to rehab. There's not enough rehab centers. Insurance doesn't cover rehab. But I can't tell you that there were at least 30 or 40 physicians that I had, you know, conversations with who were saying, nah, my patient's not going to do that, or nah, my patients are resistant, and I said to the physicians, I said, you are making a big mistake now, because you are resisting for your patients. Patients are going to resist. That's a natural, okay? When you get hit with a big disease, or when you get hit with a shocking diagnosis that changes your life, and not only changes your life, but affects one of the most basic functions of life, which is breathing, it's terrifying and it rocks your world, okay? But as medical professionals, we need to help you overcome the resistance. We know you're going to resist. That's par for the course. It's like when you're a cattle, you know, rider, a cowboy, you know the bull is going to buck. It's our job to tame the bull. And we know you're going to buck. It's okay, buck, okay? But we can't resist for you. You know what I'm saying? It's like your parent goes to your Little League game and they're waiting for you to strike out. And nothing could be more disheartening. So my feeling is, if you have a physician, if I have a physician who says to me, you know what, there's nothing more I can do for you, I thank them for their candor, and I find another physician, and I find somebody who says, you know what, let's try something else. Because we call ourselves Malcolm X rehabilitation, because we say by any means necessary. And when something stops working, we will keep tinkering and twisting. And that's why, like, rehab is not rehab. Like, my team has over 365 years experience, and it's not, everybody prepares for something to go right. When everything goes right, pretty much anyone could do it. It's when something doesn't go right, or when something goes wrong, or when someone gets stuck, that's where we really need to find things. So a lot of times patients have the idea of, well, nobody knows my body like me, right? Nobody knows our bodies like us. Well, what I could say, and I'm going to tell you something, you may not like it, because when my doctor said it to me the first time, I was like, wow, what an ass. But he was right about this. He said, you know you, but I know 1,000 of you. And you know you, and I know thousands of you. So that's where these little nuggets, and you never know what that nugget is going to be, that is going to change your life. So I'm going to stop talking now, except for questions. So again, all my material is out there in the webinar that Bill will post, but I want to get in the weeds with you. I want to get personal, and I want to, I want to really answer your questions that no one else. Don't ask me the easy ones. Don't give me the meatballs that everybody answers in every webinar. Give me the things that are really troublesome for you. Shelley.
No, I have a question if I can start.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm intrigued by is the concept of the ketogenic diet. And I've heard from so many people that we both know that have given glowing results on the ketogenic diet. I have not yet tried the ketogenic diet. What is your opinion, your feeling about it, as well as diet generally?
Okay, great question. I believe you're a paleo man, right? So here's the thing, ketogenic diet. So there are people, okay, in particular, there's one COPD patient who is, touts the diet over and over and over again. But the idea is this, and this is a very important thing, and it's not addressed enough, okay? Rather than choose one specific diet, when it comes to pulmonary fibrosis, the thing that is so important and it is not addressed enough is that we need to fuel your body, right? And we need to fuel your breathing. And you have to think about this from a supply and demand perspective, right? So we need to supply enough calories to support all your body's functions. But sometimes eating, how many people feel more short of breath after they eat? Okay, so we have to be able to feed the body without A, making you short of breath, and B, while minimizing the amount of demand that it actually takes from the food you eat. So in other words, we want to fill up your car with gas, but then we don't want to do things that are going to make sure that that gas burns out faster. So what am I talking about here? Okay. When you eat, okay, and nutrition is so important in pulmonary fibrosis, it's not discussed enough. But the reason why it's so important, and I can almost pinpoint this to the day, there comes a time when pulmonary fibrosis patients, and I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying this to tell you how important it is. There comes a time when we're swimming against the tide, and we're swimming against the nutritional tide, okay, of being able to either move forward against the tide or at least maintain our position against the tide. But there comes a time when exhaustion sets in, okay, and we get overcome by the tide. And from a supply and demand nutrition perspective, what this means is that the cost of eating is more expensive than the demand, right? Or than the supply. So in other words, why do people have difficulty eating? They have difficulty eating because in this area right here, okay, we have our lungs, and under our lungs is our diaphragm, and under our diaphragm are our abdominal contents. So everything that we eat is going to go through our esophagus into the stomach and sit underneath the diaphragm. Are you with me so far? So the way that we breathe is we inspire through an active contraction of the diaphragm, and the diaphragm contracts downward, And what that does is that creates a negative pressure that inflates the lungs. That is the active process of inspiration. Now, when your belly is full, okay, that abdominal contents, that food, drink, and air, your body doesn't care if it's air, liquid, gas, or solid, okay? It doesn't matter what it is. So if you drink a lot, okay, I don't mean alcohol, I mean any liquid. If you eat a lot, or if you're gassy and bloated, all that stuff is pushing up, making it more difficult for the diaphragm to contract downward. And the other thing that it does is it pushes the diaphragm up. And with pulmonary fibrosis, we already have smaller lungs, right? That's the nature of restrictive lung disease. So those lungs are going to be higher and contain lower volumes anyway. So what that means is that when we fill up what's down here, and I'm using my screen kind of as the bottom of the screen being the abdominal contents, this being the diaphragm, and the top of my screen being the lungs. But when we fill this up, what we're doing is we're pushing the diaphragm up, we're increasing the resistance against the diaphragm, and then therefore resisting or lowering the pressure gradient. And what that means is that it's harder to take a breath. So what that means is that you now have to breathe more quickly, okay, because you're breathing more shallowly. So it's like this. If you have a glass and the glass is half full, that means that you have to carry double the amount of glasses in order to get the same volume. So what that means is that if you're taking half the volume of your breath, then that means that you have to take twice as many breaths. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that so far? Because this is a whole big thing that's all connected, and I want to connect the dots for you. Does anyone have any questions about that so far?
Just to reiterate, if you want to ask Noah a question, and now's the time to do it, just
have
turn
a
your
question.
speaker on. In the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, just click the button that says, right now it should say unmute, and click that, and you can ask him a question.
Elena, is that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Go ahead.
My question is, when you were talking about how he pushes down, so it brings up the food up to your esophagus, right? Will that cause GERDs?
That's a different thing. That's a different thing that I'm talking about. So what we're talking about is you're talking about, so here's, okay, so look again, top of my screen, lungs, middle of my screen, diaphragm, bottom of my screen is abdominal contents, right? And the trachea and esophagus run up the center of all of that. So the answer is, when I say pushing up, I am talking about grossly pushing up, meaning that the abdominal contents, meaning the organs, are full, pushing up on the diaphragm, pushing up on the lungs. But you make a good point, because when this happens, there's increased intra-abdominal pressure and increased intrathoracic pressure. And if you think about a tube of toothpaste that you're squeezing in the middle, that's esophageal reflux. So that toothpaste is coming out of your stomach back into the esophagus. So yes, GERD is extremely common. And the other thing about pulmonary fibrosis and GERD is that there's a big connection because of everything that we're talking about. Because of the tightness of the thorax, okay, there's not as much play. And so everything you do is going to squeeze that much harder. So it's like having a full tube of toothpaste where it takes less to squeeze it than when you have an almost empty tube of toothpaste. And the thing about it is that not only can this go into your esophagus, but if it goes high enough, the esophagus and the trachea are very closely situated anatomically. And the problem you can have is that that acid can also go into your trachea and then into your airways, increasing inflammation, okay? And the problem with that is that obviously there's more inflammation in an already inflammatory process. But the thing is also that even though you don't have symptoms, right? Like when we think about GERD, think about, burning in the chest or heartburn, or sometimes we get like sore throat or hoarse voice. But there's also something called silent reflux, okay? And you can actually, if they did an endoscopy, you can actually see all of the impact of reflux, even though you don't necessarily have the symptoms of it. So one thing, and this is something that I learned from, really the person who I respect most in pulmonary fibrosis, Dr. Robert Kainer, when I asked him about 3 things that he feels are the most important, one of the things he specifically said is make sure either check to see if you have reflux, and if you do have reflux, make sure that it's treated, because again, you don't necessarily know. So if your pulmonologist, is really up to speed with that, then you know what, as part of your pulmonary fibrosis workup, you're going to see a gastroenterologist and make sure that you don't have reflux, okay? Because again, sometimes, one thing I truly believe in the body and in life is that inflammation in one area of the body is just like a wildfire. It's like if you have inflammation in one area, you have inflammation in other areas. And so if you have this cycle of untreated reflux that's always going into your airways, and now you have an exacerbation of your lungs or your airways are tight, it's just this kind of like, it's like when kids pass a cold back and forth among each other, when you have kids that live together, it's like you have different body parts that just keep passing the inflammation back and forth. So that's a great thing that I would have gotten to it another time, but I'm glad we got to it early. And so the point is, if you've never been assessed for acid reflux or gastroesophageal reflux disorder, ask your doctor if that's a worthwhile look to take and then treating it. So Dr. Kainer believes that's in the top 3 of most important things that somebody with interstitial lung disease should do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I go on? And let me just say one thing. I know I talk fast. I talk really fast because I like this and I'm excited about it. We're going to record this. It's being recorded. So just have the idea that you'll be able to watch it again, okay? Because this is a lot of material. When I get into a 90-minute box, I try to race because I really want to get as much in as possible, but you'll be able to watch this again. Okay, other questions? Ed raised his hand. Shelley has a question.
Yes.
Ed, Shelley.
Yes,
Ed, go for it.
now, I'm so thankful for your advice to exercise your butt off, and I've been doing that. The thing is that's kind of limiting for me is coughing. What do you recommend for cough? I've been trying like hot teas, and that works a little bit, and these Manuka honey drops, lozenges, and that works a little bit. You have any other tips?
I sure do. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. No, I'm just kidding. I discovered something a few years ago that really is a miracle, okay? It specifically works on the cough associated with interstitial lung disease. And what it is are Fisherman's Friend cough drops. I don't know if you've ever tried those before, but what we did one time was we went to CVS and we bought every lozenge cough drop spray that they had. And for some reason, none of them really did anything except the Fisherman's Friend. They're really strong, they're menthol, but I have had people in my reception area coughing their ass off nonstop. Give them these Fisherman's Friend, and it significantly minimizes the cough. Now, let me just talk about, have you ever tried those, Ed? Ed?
No,
Ed.
I haven't tried them.
Fisherman's Friend, try those, trust me. And everybody try them. And everybody's got their own little kind of remedy, right? My grandmother said drink matzo ball soup, or somebody's gonna say honey and lemon. Let me explain to you what's a little different about the cough associated with interstitial lung disease. There is a component of, like whereas a COPD patient or somebody with bronchiectasis or chronic bronchitis is gonna cough because they have a lot of mucus. Okay, it's a little bit different with the ILD patient. And I never hear anyone talk about it in this way, but this is a really interesting thing, and it's going to lead into cough and exercise. So the lining of the airways are lined with smooth muscle, right? And this smooth muscle has the ability to contract and relax depending upon the situation. So you say, why would I want my airways to contract, right? But like imagine like you're in the middle of a dust storm or something like that. They contract to protect you, and they produce mucus to protect you from those things that are about to come into your airways. And then they relax to help you get more air, but they are muscle. Now, I think of it as a muscle in the same way. Now, it's very different than skeletal muscle. So it's very different than like your biceps and your triceps or your hamstrings or something like that. But if you think about it, when we go to do a sport, we stretch out those muscles. We do a gradual warm up, right? So that they don't go into muscle spasm. If we start too quick or it's too cold or something like that, we get a muscle spasm, we get a cramp, right? And what I have found is that there's a similar phenomenon that occurs with the smooth muscle on the airways. And you can actually affect that, and you can actually increase the constriction or increase the dilation depending upon how you do your exercise, right? So for example, if you're doing a hamstring stretch and it's cold outside and I don't warm up and all of a sudden I go down, you ever see like these football players run off the field or hit the floor because their hamstring goes into spasm, right? Well, think about it. There's also bronchospasm, right? So how many people have this experience where when it's cold outside, they have a more difficult time breathing? Okay, how many people have this experience that when they go out, sometimes they have to stop within the first couple of minutes of exercise, but then once they get going for a while, they actually can breathe better and do more? Okay, so think about that. There's a lot of reasons, and there may be many, many different reasons, okay? So part of it is metabolic, okay? Meaning that as exercise goes on, we become more aerobic. So the first few minutes of exercise are always going to be the least efficient, okay? But I also believe that there's an airway component to it, and I believe that airway component is smooth muscle. So that's the reason why so much of our exercise is done in a ramped protocol, so that, you know, we start off very slow. We start with deep breathing. We're allowing the muscles to warm up. We're allowing the lungs to open up. Because think about it like this. The other thing about it is that if you start off too fast, it's like this. It's like, imagine we're all in a theater and we want to go out. They say, you know what? The show can't go on tonight. We have to get out of here. Something's wrong, right? And if we file out very gently, single file, we're going to have a nice flow of people outside of the theater doors, right? But if we all rush to the exit, then guess what happens? We have this, you know, what do they call that? Like a bottleneck, and everybody's now stuck and having a hard time getting out. Same thing with the airways. That's why we try to use these techniques to help you breathe in and out nice and smoothly, because the harder you blow or the harder you try to inspire, the more airway narrowing we get. So Ed, in your case, I would say specifically, now back to one other thing that completes this puzzle is that the coughing associated with this, if you think about your lungs as a muscle, right, which the lungs are not a muscle, but they act in some ways like a muscle, okay? Both lungs and muscle get more efficient as they warm up, and when they're cold, they're tight. So if you think about it like a candle, right, or if you think about it like wax, or you think about it like clay, when it's warm, you can mold it because it's pliable, and when it's cold, it's tight and it's hard. So the idea about this is that the lungs, okay, when you need to take that deep breath, just like if I had a tight muscle here, if you were to pull me too hard, the natural thing that the muscle would do would be to bounce back, right? So if we think about it from a supply and demand perspective, when you need to take that deep breath, you need to take the deep breath, but whether it's because of fibrosis or whether it's because your airways are tight, it doesn't matter what the reason is, but when you go to take that deep breath, it's not there for you, and it's like you get stuck, and that's that spasmodic interstitial lung disease cough that is different than a standard cough. So in your case, and in everybody's case, what I would say is, A, start the workout, you know, a few minutes before with some Fisherman's Friend cough drops or lozenges. Don't get the cherry flavored or any of the special ones that they try to make. Get the hardcore Fisherman's Friend menthol, you know, get those, and then gradually increase your workout, focusing on nice, easy, controlled breathing, but smooth movement of air in and out. And what that's going to do is it's going to relax your airways. It's going to relax the smooth muscle inside your airways. And no one talks about this. I never have heard anybody else talk about relaxing the smooth muscle other than with medication, okay? But I know that you can do it with exercise. So if you're somebody who has a hard time with bronchospasm, or you have a hard time taking a deep breath and you cough during exercise, then the strategy would be to always start with the lowest exercise first and work up and do the hardest exercise fast. So for example, if you're in rehab, let's say you're gonna do the upper body ergometer and a bike and a treadmill, right? So in that case, you would get benefit from doing the upper body ergometer first because it's the lightest, but it also opens up the thorax. Then the second hardest, which is the bike. Then the third hardest, save the treadmill for the end, because physiologically, okay, what that does is by that time, you're already the most aerobic from an oxygen utilization perspective. But the other thing about it is that your airways should be the loosest and you should have the best mechanical motion of air in and out and the reduced cough. Try it. Let me know. Does that make sense, Ed?
Sure does. What do you think of the Buteyko technique?
I'm just going to say no. I'm not going to discuss it, but it's got too much breath holding. Anything that's real breath holdy, I worry about things that ask you to hold your breath a lot. And another kind of rule of thumb is that anything that says it cures something, I'm immediately drawn away from it. So Buteyko, if you read their website, they'll tell you it cures asthma, it cures this, cures that. I feel like if you're saying one thing, it's like lying and cheating. It's like if you're not a liar, then you're not going to lie. And if you're not a cheater, nothing's going to make you cheat. And if you're a cheater, then nothing's going to make you faithful, you know? And so I feel like if we're starting with the premise that you're telling me that this technique you have is going to cure what I have, I'm skeptical. And I've known people who use it. There are definitely people who swear by it, but there's better ways of doing it. There's more basic ways of doing it. You know, everybody's always looking for kind of like that silver bullet, the Buteyko, the this, the that. You know, and we got into this by the keto. You know, it's like one of my other people that I love and somebody who Bill introduced me to is Brian Traskos, who's, you know, he's a Tai Chi Qigong guy. He's a physical therapist who specializes in Tai Chi Qigong, but he's also got a super powerful presence. Like there's something very special about him. And I attended a webinar. I attended an actual live seminar with him. And a great analogy that he and his wife gave, okay, was this. We're in a room and there's 4 doors and one of the doors is open, right? Yet we want to pound on the other 3 doors and we want to beat our head against those other 3 doors over and over again, even though this door is right here for you. And the things that I say to people is, you know what? Of course we're waiting for a cure. Everybody wishes and prays there's going to be a cure. Everybody is waiting for that magic medication. But you know what? It may not come, okay? And I don't say that to disappoint you or to make you mad or to depress you. I say it because even if the cure comes, you got to be ready for it, okay? And the thing is that there are things that are right in front of you right now. Things like taking your medications properly, things like exercise, daily exercise, eating well, okay, meditation and managing your stress, and then prevention of infection through basic things like hand washing. That is ultimate pulmonary wellness. KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, okay? We are all looking for this stuff that's out here when right in front of us are things that really, really work. So if you come to me and say, no, I don't really exercise, no, I don't watch what I eat, and no, I don't manage my stress through meditation or other techniques, then you know what? You're doing yourself a tremendous disservice. And I build my career on the basics. You know, there's some people who build their career and they talk and nobody understands what they're saying and it's this esoteric treatment. The basics are there for you, and the basics are ultimate pulmonary wellness. Take your medication properly, exercise, eat right, manage your stress, prevent infection. That's it. It's all right there, and it's all free. It's all free. So how's that?
Could I ask you, say that one more, because that's the 5 pillars of what you do.
Yeah, it's exactly what we do. So it's take your medication properly. So it's medical. It's having the right doctors and medical team, taking the right medications and taking them properly. Exercise, 20%. Okay, nutrition, 20%. Stress management, relaxation training, which is meditation, 20%, and then prevention of infection, 20%. Now, here's the thing. The percentages can shift. It's not set in stone, right? So let's say you're 150 pounds overweight, then guess what? Your weight loss is the main thing. So we want to keep the main thing also. But this conversation started by talking about keto, right? And it transferred into some other stuff. But the thing is, they're all related, right? And I'll just say, do I think there are pluses to keto? Yes, I do. Okay. You know, how many people have seen Fight Club, the movie? Okay. So the first rule of Fight Club, Kevin Peace, you know the first rule of Fight Club?
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Don't talk about Fight Club. That's right. So there's CrossFit and there's keto, right? And the first rule of CrossFit and keto is never shut the hell up about CrossFit and keto. It's like anyone who's on keto, just that's all I talk about. Keto, 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 keto. CrossFit, CrossFit, CrossFit. I think keto is okay, but better than keto, in my opinion, and I could be proven wrong because there are a lot of people really researching keto as it relates to respiratory disease now, is this. I think it's too restrictive, and I think that when you have pulmonary fibrosis or any other interstitial lung disease as compared to COPD or an obstructive disease, I think you must guard your body weight. I think you must guard your mass. And even if you're a little bit overweight, or even if you could stand to lose a few pounds, I'd rather that than have you be too thin. Because remember what I was talking about before, and this is how the whole thing kind of comes full circle. When I was saying we're swimming against this tide, okay, and we're trying to pay the bills, and there's a certain point where we're overcome, that has to do with the nutrition and the exercise aspect of it. Because we know that breathing takes a lot of energy, okay? And sometimes you will hear people say things like, when you have a respiratory disease, you burn 10 times the calories as somebody who doesn't. That's bull, okay? There's no way that's possible, because that means that you're burning 10 to 15,000 calories per day. Nobody can eat 10 to 15. Even if you went to the hot dog eating contest, you still probably wouldn't take in 15,000 calories. But from a respiratory perspective, your respiratory muscles take more. So you're burning calories even when you're at rest. And the problem with that is that when you combine that, which is an increased demand, with a decreased supply due to all the things we talked about already, where you have a difficult time eating, then you have to really strategize. And what I find is that when somebody has a hard time maintaining their weight, okay, there's almost like a tipping point where it's very poor for prognosis with pulmonary fibrosis patients. So if you're either having trouble maintaining your weight or you're losing your weight, you must make this your number one priority, even above exercise. And how do you do it? Okay, you can't necessarily eat more, right? Because sometimes you say, well, I'm too full or this or that. But let me talk a little bit about nutrition. So there's three basic nutrients, right? Protein, fat, carbohydrates. And the main differences that you need to know as they relate to respiratory disease are as follows. Protein builds muscle, right? We need muscle. Fat, okay, is important. Carbohydrates supply energy, okay? But there's something called the respiratory quotient. Does anyone know what this is? Okay. What the respiratory quotient is it means that 1 gram of carbohydrate versus 1 gram of protein versus 1 gram of fat are going to produce different amounts of carbon dioxide in your body through metabolism. And we know that carbon dioxide is the main stimulus for us to breathe, right? So if you eat something, you want to minimize the carbon dioxide load, and the way to do that is by minimizing carbohydrate, because carbohydrate produces the most carbon dioxide per gram of all the nutrients. So paleo, in my opinion, while extremely restrictive in some ways, okay, has a great thing, which is that it's low carb, high fat, high protein, okay? So I will give it a plus and a thumbs up with that, because that is the eating pattern that I think people should have with respiratory disease. But I think it's I think you can't restrict. So carbohydrate produces the most carbon dioxide at 1.0. Okay, so think about that, 1.0. Protein produces the second most, and it also produces the second least because it's in the middle at 0.8. And fat produces the least, 0.7. Okay, so fat is like 7 molecules of CO2. Protein is 8. Carbohydrate is 10. right? So the idea is we want to limit carbohydrates. So a lot of times when people try to get people to gain weight, they say things like, oh yeah, potatoes, oh yeah, rice, pasta. No, that, because you see what happens there is you eat that big pasta meal and we're spilling carbon dioxide into the blood. And what does that mean? That sends a signal to your brain that says, breathe, 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 breathe. And that now makes you breathe harder and faster and burns more calories. And it overrides the benefit that you get from those calories. Now, here's something else that's very, very important. And this is complex, but I'm going to simplify it in 1 second into one sentence. Fat has 9 calories per gram, okay? Protein and carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. So what that means is that in addition to producing the least carbon dioxide, fat gives you the most bang for your buck in terms of calories. And the other beauty of that is that we can add it to things very easily in the form of oils, right? So if you're going to cook something, cook it in olive oil, okay? And people say, well, you know, my cholesterol. Olive oil and healthy fats are cardioprotective, which means you get the benefit of having them protect your heart and affect positively your cholesterol profile and your lipid profile. You get the benefit of the calories, and you don't get the downside of producing that much carbon dioxide. So in my opinion, you know, and this may be very similar to paleo and or keto. Again, I think that you don't want to over restrict, but high protein to maintain that muscle, right? And high fat to maintain a little bit of fat while reducing the carbohydrate and therefore carbon dioxide load. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? So now let's say you're losing weight. So there are things that we recommend, and I don't know the names offhand. I have to check on them, but there are 3 protein shakes that I think are the best protein shakes, and they're 0 carbs, right? Like some protein shakes have a lot of sugar and have a lot of carbohydrates in it, and sugar is just a simple carbohydrate, right? So if you're going to eat a carbohydrate, it's better to eat a complex carbohydrate, and it's better to eat like a whole grain carbohydrate rather than a white carbohydrate, which gives you 0 nutritional value. But the idea is that if you're having trouble gaining weight or you're losing too much weight, 0 carbohydrate protein powder, and then you can add to that shake olive oil. And it's not going to make you more full. It's not going to increase your carbon dioxide load, and it's going to bang up your calories. And that, in many ways, is even more important than your actual meals. Now, not from an enjoyment perspective, okay? And as I said before, when I was talking about the monochromatic version of ourselves, I do believe in art and fashion and music and food and lifestyle, okay? But when you have pulmonary fibrosis or when you have an interstitial lung disease and you start to really see that scale changing in a downward direction, you must prioritize nutrition over everything else. And if it means even if you don't have any food that day, but you just drink protein shakes with olive oil, then that's what you have to do. Because again, and it's a scary thing, there's almost like a switch that goes off when we could see somebody can't maintain their weight, and it's not a good thing for prognosis. So keeping the main thing, if you're having trouble gaining weight, or you're losing too much weight, you must prioritize nutrition over everything else. High fat, as much fat as you can, but not in the form of a Ben & Jerry's Chunky Monkey. Healthy fats like olive oil, add it to everything, cook in olive oil, add it to your salads. That's my opinion and my experience. So paleo, I think it's okay. I think it's very restrictive. I think that the principles are right. I think there's going to be a lot of more research coming out about it. And I think, you know, at one time they said Atkins, and then they said South Beach. You know, there's a lot of diets out there. But I think, you know, we want this to be like a restaurant where you don't have to take everything, right? You get to choose a la carte, because different things are going to be much more beneficial for certain people. And I think sometimes there's a little trial and error there.
Mike has been trying to talk, and Mike, you're unmuted. Go for it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Noah, for being with us. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Back to the cough for a minute.
Yep.
I've had success with Hall's cough drops as well as chewing peppermint gum. Now, I found another thing that I'd like to ask you about, and
Sure.
that is 1 drop of peppermint oil on my tongue. Any comment about that?
Let me see your tongue. Oh yeah, I could see it. No, I don't. Does it help you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so you lead me to a principle that is first and foremost. If it helps, do it. If it hurts, don't do it. Okay, it's like you say, you go to doc. The doc, it hurts when I do this. Don't do this. If it helps when you do that, even if there's not a medical explanation for it, it doesn't matter. If it helps you, and I would say to everybody here, a drop of peppermint on the tongue, that's easy enough. Try it. If it helps you, so be it. Okay, I don't know everything about it. I know some things about it, but most of 95% of what I know from patients. So I will have people try that, and it's not going to work for everybody, but if it works for you, who cares if it works for everybody else?
Well, it's just 1 drop, and I was concerned about whether the ingesting the oil possibly into my lungs would be harmful.
I don't think so. I think some people have to be careful with peppermint because it does increase reflux. So if it increases reflux, but I don't think so. Listen, we ingest things. You know, it's like people be like, "Oh, I'm going to have this Mountain Dew," right? I mean, a Mountain Dew. Like, I'd rather have the oil in the Mountain Dew. It's probably healthier for you. I wouldn't worry about 1 drop on your tongue.
Okay,
at
thank you.
all. And if it works for the cough, then by all means do it. Shelley.
Yeah.
Wait, can't hear you now. Wait, you. Okay, go. Don't touch anything.
Okay.
Go.
All right.
Go.
At the ATS conference, Bill Vick interviewed 2 doctors that were talking about, in the old days, they believed the scarring in the lungs could never be fixed, like scarring on your skin. You've always got a scar. But 2 doctors, Dr. Howard Wong and another woman, said that now they've found that with all the diversity of the tissue in the lungs, that something can be done, and they're working on it now in clinical trials, and some of them are getting ready to go to a stage, I guess, where they'll use humans. But what kind of, medications or treatments are they talking about that are promising for, repairing scarred lungs?
I have no idea. But I realized that Dr. Wong moved from where he was before to Houston. I don't know. I'm not in a position to comment on what they're doing in clinical trials. Certainly those are scientists that are above my pay grade, in terms of what they're doing. I wouldn't comment on it. But I'm a believer that there has to be a way. I mean, one of the problems with medication and ILD, and one of the reasons why getting a diagnosis is so hard for people, is because up until very recently, there were no medications. And so a lot of doctors strangely had this idea, well, why should I test for it when there's nothing I could do for it anyway? The 2 medications that are available right now, okay, are fibrotic proliferation drugs. We're talking about Ofev and Esbriet. The problem with these is that they come with a lot of side effects, okay? And some people tolerate them better than others, but there are some people who really, it makes them so uncomfortable, and particularly with the gastrointestinal stuff, that you sacrifice a lot, even though, don't worry, Crystal, your hair looks fine. The thing is that you sacrifice a lot by taking that, right? Because for me, I have to say to myself, if I'm going to take a drug that's maybe going to prolong my life, but the time that I have, but it's going to make me so uncomfortable on a daily basis that I'm going to go to the bathroom 30 times and not be able to maintain nutrition, and it's going to negatively impact me in other ways. Now, don't get the idea that I'm saying don't take these medications, but I think we're moving in the right direction only because finally ILD is getting some attention. Cardiovascular disease has always been child number 1. Respiratory disease has always been the stepchild, and particularly ILD was always super in the shadows because it's so complex. And, it's like Robert Kainer says, well, part of the problem is that the names are so complex of the diseases, they often don't make, like just as one example, usual interstitial pneumonia, right? Like we know what pneumonia is, but you say like usual interstitial pneumonia. What's interstitial mean? And it's not usual. So there's, we're getting there in terms of interstitial disease. I don't know what clinical trials are there. I feel like and I gave a talk about this the other day where I said there's researchers, and the researchers should research, and the clinicians should treat clinically, and the patients should do the things that they could do every day. Like, we all have our lanes. And I feel like my lane is kind of the bridge, but also the lifestyle stuff. I'm not in a position to comment, is what I'm saying. That's a long way of saying no comment. I don't know. Sorry. Other questions, comments? True, Jack?
Noah, as far as the OFib,
yes,
I researched how it worked. And it's like a tyrosine kinase inhibitor, and inhibits like 3 tyrosine kinases. Now, if also there's food and spices that do the same thing. So what I'm doing is I'm taking like holy basil, rosemary, ginseng, which is from soy, curcumin, vitamin E, green tea, resveratrol, licorice too. And Bill, I think he's doing curcumin, which is it's a very strong tyrosine kinase inhibitor. So that's if someone can't tolerate OFEV, or they want to, get the OFEV effect in addition to the pirfenidone, they can try these tyrosine kinase inhibitors that are just natural foods.
Yeah, I'm all for that stuff. Okay, I'm all for herbs. I'm all for supplements. I'm all for things like that. I think there's a lot of variability though in the industry. So I would never say don't try it. I would say try it, start slow with it, see what the impact is. But for example, there's a lot of times where they'll research supplements. The supplement industry is extremely unregulated, right? So they'll go and they'll take stuff off the shelf, and they'll find that not only does this supplement not have in it what it says it does or the amount that it says it does, but it has stuff in it that it doesn't say it does. So, for example, if you take a peppermint, let's say peppermint as an example, peppermint that's grown in Chile, or even coffee that's grown in Chile versus coffee that's grown in Costa Rica. There are differences in it because of the difference in the environment, right? Because of differences in the soil. So I would say I'm all for that. I don't know if that's going to replace the OFEV or the Esbriet. But again, by any means necessary. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it works, do it.
Dr. Greenspan.
Drew.
Yes. My question is reflux. I'm a coffee drinker. I'm a post-transplant patient since 2014. I drink coffee. Does drinking coffee increases my chance of developing acid reflux?
Does it?
So far, I haven't had a problem with it.
So caffeine is a known trigger for acid reflux, okay? And as a transplant patient, inflammation is obviously very important for you. And, fighting rejection is very important for you for the long term. Now, that being said, I am out of Keurig, okay, cups, but somebody last night brought me some from France, like some actual coffee that I just mixed in. I'm a coffee drinker. My point is that I'm not giving it up no matter what. So I'd rather treat the reflux, okay, than give up coffee, because I can treat the reflux. If I give up coffee, I'll never get anything done, okay? And if you know me, you know I'm up like most of the day and the night. But I would say this. I would say, Drew, make sure if you haven't had it checked yet, make sure you don't have reflux, okay? So whether that means an endoscopy, and again, we talked about silent reflux. So you say, as far as I know, I haven't had a problem yet, but it's like, who's in the other room? If the door is closed, we don't really know. So I would say, talk to your doctor about that. Caffeine is a known increased trigger for reflux, but not everybody has a problem with it. There are some people who are super sensitive to it. Some people can drink 20 cups a day and not have an issue.
Okay, thank you.
My friend Bill Jackson introduced me to a kind of a blend of espresso or strong coffee and milk, or I believe it's called a cortado. I had one yesterday for the first time, and candidly, I think the milk in it or whatever it was is a buffer. I
Yeah.
don't have any problem. If I drink coffee, I do.
Excuse me for 1 second. I'm so sorry. Hey, get in here. Let's go. Let's go. Come on, Kate.
This is real live stuff, guys. This is real live stuff.
Real live. My dogs are going crazy. My neighbors love that on the weekend. But hold on 1 second. Hey, get over here. Come here.
This is about as real as it ever gets.
All right, we're back. All right, so yeah, I think you're right about that, Bill. I think it does act as a buffer. But again, everybody's different. So if you are bothered by it, and there's ways to treat it. You know what I mean? To me, I'd rather take something and enjoy the coffee. My opinion. Not over, not over. I'm not saying you should get reflux or sacrifice your lungs for it, but I think just make sure that you're not having silent reflux and you're good.
Right. Well, I drink in moderation now.
Other questions, comments?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure. Who's that?
It's Victoria.
Victoria, go for it.
We looked into the online pulmonary wellness, and it was beautifully done, a lot of pretty scenes, but it didn't tell us what we need to have available to be able to do it. Do we need a treadmill in the house, or
Nope.
how much oxygen we need? Can you explain that a little bit more for us?
Sure. So we, after 27 years of brick and mortar pulmonary wellness, which we still do, and hearing how few people actually receive, pulmonary rehab, we developed an online program called Pulmonary Wellness Online. Okay. The program, what we did was we basically brought together the 15 top people going back decades, including the people that wrote the book that I used when I was in school, to really build what I consider the most, the ideal program. So you don't need any equipment for it, okay? So what it is basically each day you will receive information. You'll get 4 pieces, and there's 4 main components to it. So one of them is called T&M, okay, Thoughts and Meditations. And what that is each day we talk about different things that you need to know to live well with a respiratory disease. You'll hear me talk excessively. If you ever want to know me if you don't want to know me at all, don't get the program. But I also have an amazing team of people. So Thoughts and Meditation this is the intro to the day. We sometimes have a question of the day, and this is what we're going to talk about today. And it's all different kind of things to help you think about things that may not have come into your head before, right? Like we often think that something is the problem, but maybe something else is the real problem. It also has BBFS, which is breathing, balance, flexibility, and strength. That includes yoga. That includes Tai Chi and Qigong. That includes meditation. It includes weight training. It includes Bollywood. It's a whole bunch of different things. And we keep it interesting. We try to, we're all artists and, filmmakers and photographers. So it is a beautiful thing. It's magic. It's beautifully done. Of course, I'm biased. But there's that, BBFS. And each day, it's really like a sampler of everything. So we teach you everything that you need to know. And then you have the opportunity to go back. For the first 42-day boot camp, we give you the specifics. After 42 days, you have access to all of that and new material, and you can create your own program. Boot camp is $99.99 for 42 days, and if you don't get better, we give you $100 back. So it's if it doesn't work for you, we give you your money back. It's that simple. That's how confident I am, and that's how much I don't want your money if it doesn't work for you. Okay. The other thing is pulmonary cardio. So pulmonary cardio are our walkabouts, and the walkabouts are basically films that we've shot all over the world of beautiful scenes. I've shot a lot of them. I have a filmmaker who's one of my partners who's brilliant filmmaker. He's like a 22-year-old kid. He's so great. and he's been everywhere. And what it is it's walking in place. So there's 4 steps. So there's a basic step, side step, high step, and squat step. And it starts at 4 minutes on the first day, and every day we add a minute. And by the end of 6 weeks, you're doing 30 minutes of exercise while you're watching it. But they're virtual walks, essentially, through different places. And then once a week, we have a meeting like this where I have guests, physicians and other practitioners, or we do Q&As, but we have live interactive meetings every Wednesday at 7 p.m. But you don't really need a lot of equipment. You don't need anything. You don't need a treadmill. You don't need a bike. If you have those things, we'll teach you how to utilize them. But you can do it simply standing and, doing the exercises. So it's super easy. I mean, we want it to be for everybody. And now we're starting to translate it into other languages because guess what? Most people, I think, on this call are in the U.S., okay? You think we got it bad here, okay? Go to places like India. Go to places like China, where lung disease is so undertreated and not even on the radar. So we're trying to get it to as many people around the world as possible, and it's not a money issue at all. We don't care about the money. We just want everybody to have access to it. And we don't want, resistance is a big thing, right? So Brian gave a great talk last week about resistance, and they say there's 4 resistance types, right? So there's the victim, the judger. So it's like judgment is like, oh, you know what? I don't like this guy. Look at that. He has tattoos, and I'm not going to listen to him no matter what, right? The victim is, oh, why does this always happen to me? The confused person is they don't want you to teach them how to do it. They want you to do it for them. Let's see, what were some of the other ones? But you see the idea is we all have these resistance patterns, right? Like nobody walks into a Dunkin' Donuts or a Waffle House or a Burger King and thinks they're about to well nourish their bodies, right? Just like nobody thinks cigarette smoking is good for you. Just like everybody knows that you shouldn't be sitting on your couch watching 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, back to back, right? We know these things. So we ask ourselves, look, I got a Peloton right there, okay? Ask me how often or how infrequently I use it, right? It's not that we don't know it. We have these different blocks. And so overcoming the block is also very important. But that's part of what we address. Listen, I'm biased, okay? I don't do everything right. I make a lot of mistakes. Everybody, like Bill said to me the other day, he said, all your ideas are good. I said, no, all my ideas are not good. I don't tell anyone about the dumb ones, okay? I only tell them about the good ones, okay? But the idea is this is a really good program, and it's beautifully done. I'm biased, but, we put a lot of time and energy into it. We put a lot of time and energy and care into every single thing we do. There's nothing.
I've gone through your program, and I'm biased because I think it's a core of living with this lung disease. But do we have anyone else on the call that could just speak pro, con, good, bad, indifferent?
Absolutely. Bruce Anderson here in Houston. I got involved about 6 months ago doing the boot camp, and it's been a life changer for me. I mean, I was laying on my ass, really feeling bad, not wanting to exercise, thinking it would reduce my lung capacity or make me more tired. And having gone through the boot camp and then proceeded to have a daily practice has been fantastic. And the other thing that is so good about it is educational. I mean, Noah is omniscient. I mean, the guy knows everything. I mean, it's just amazing. And you actually have the opportunity to ask questions during these weekly webinars that are personal questions that might only apply to you, but he'll go ahead and respond to them. So I'm just 100% convinced that anybody with PF would benefit from doing this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, you mentioned that may only apply to you. I think very few things only apply to one person. You know what I mean? Like, of course, if my ceiling comes down, but what I try to do in everything that I do, every time I teach, I try to make it as universal as possible. And like, for example, Bruce, you say something that only applies to you, right? Like I've had some really kind of oddball cases over the years. And the thing is, it's like, if you, like when you have, there's 80% of the stuff is going to work with 80% of the people. Okay, that's the basics. But then there's people, you know, a lot of times doctors send me their patients when they've tried everything and nothing works. And then we have to really tinker with the program a little bit. But by doing it for so long and seeing so many patients, we have so many different ways we could do it. And sometimes there's a woman in, and I'm drawing a blank on her name right now, but she runs a pulmonary rehab in South Africa. She's a young therapist, and I love her. She's so energetic. I'm jealous of her social media game, but she will talk to me sometimes about patients that they have trouble with. And it's like, I love to give her advice because she's like it always blows her mind when it like works instantly. But that comes from doing this day in, day out for almost 30 years. And also my EMS background has helped a lot as well. But the idea is, I think that most things, even though it seems like it only applies to you, I try to make them universal. And there's a lot of things that somebody could try. You don't know. It could be that one thing that no one's ever said to you, but then you hear it and just like the world opens up for you.
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, my pulmonologist, I'm realizing they don't know everything for sure. I mean, for instance, I complain of fatigue, and he says, well, the fatigue is not associated with a pulmonary fibrosis. Well, everybody I know who has pulmonary fibrosis has some level of fatigue issues. So, you know, that's an example. Another question I have is I have neuropathy that's just surfaced over the last few 2 or 3 weeks. I have no idea whether or not that's associated with PF. He says no.
I don't think so.
Comment about that.
I don't think so. I think you know, first of all, let me just say this, okay? A lot of times, like we are a black and white, we are, as human beings, we like to be black and white thinkers, right? We like to control things. We like it when everything fits into a nice, neat little box and ties up with a bow. It doesn't work that way, right? So a lot of times on social media, I'll see somebody say something like, you know what, my shoulder hurts. Is that my PF or is that my COPD? And there's a point at which, you know, everything gets attributed to PF. And it's not like that, right? That's the idea behind a differential diagnosis. And the thing about differential diagnosis is we ask the questions and we, you know, start with everything on the table and rule something out and rule something out and rule something out. And sometimes it is your PF, sometimes it's not. Neuropathy, I don't have a gut feeling that that's your PF. Is it your feet?
Yeah, and so that's helpful for me to know that.
So is it your, can you just tell me about the neuropathy for a moment?
Yeah, it's my feet. Yeah, and it's from, you know, it seems to be exacerbated when I'm exercising, but it's primarily my feet is moving from my left foot into my right foot. So, you know.
And are you diabetic?
No.
Okay, so here's what I would suggest, okay? Do you have any vascular problems that you're aware of?
No.
So if I were gonna bet my life, if I had one thing to say what I think it is right now, I would say get an MRI of your lumbar spine. And because it's associated with exercise, I bet you have some disc pathology that's kind of pressing on your nerves, and that's what's causing your neuropathy.
Okay.
And so with that can be treated, okay? That could be treated with physical therapy, or, you know, there's certainly injections, or there's a lot of ways to treat it if it's coming from your disc. But a lot of times neuropathy comes from low back lumbar spine nerve dysfunction or disc dysfunction. Scott?
Yeah, I just thought I'd jump in there. I had a similar case. I had a condition that I guess you could characterize it as foot drop in my left foot. And I had numbness, and I had some numbness up my shin. And I went to a neurologist, and I had to...
Wait, don't say it yet. Perineal nerve palsy?
I don't know what that is.
That's what I think it is. That's what I think it is.
I'll tell you what it was, because
it
was solved after he ran all these batteries of tests with the electrical impulses and all that. And he thought that I might have a very exotic disease. I can't remember what he called it, but he said he could be corrected surgically and so on and so forth. And I became very alarmed. And then after the test results came back and he analyzed them, the neurologist said, no, it's not that. And I said, well, what could it be possibly? What other things could cause this? And he says, well, some pressure, as you just mentioned.
Exactly, pressure on the perineal nerve. Yep.
What I was doing is I had a bad habit of while I was working at my computer, and I work at my computer a lot because of my trade, I crossed my legs.
Yep, look. I knew it. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, and I was touching just the outside. My knee was putting pressure on the inside of my calf, on the outside of my calf behind my knee, and I stopped crossing my legs. The foot drop went away, and the neuralgia went away. Had a similar problem with my hands. These two fingers on my left hand were always numb. They're still a little bit numb, but I found
Ulnar nerve palsy.
I was thinking that I was doing like this when I was sleeping, and I started sleeping with my hands and my elbow more than a 90 degree. So it turns out, no, it doesn't have anything to do with my disease. It has to do with bad posture habits.
So let me tell you the difference between what you just described and what Bruce is describing, okay? So you're talking about a physical pressure because the location that you described on your leg is the exact distribution of the perineal nerve, and the perineal nerve is what is what does dorsiflexion, which means it brings us back. So you had a little palsy there, and it could be a stretch or a strain. Same thing here. You had an ulnar nerve palsy, and that affects the fourth and fifth fingers and half of the middle finger, right? So if you were finding, Scott, that you weren't as effective at giving people the middle finger, that's probably why, okay? But what Bruce is talking about, it's a little bit different because yours is very localized. And what I believe Bruce is talking about is coming from the central cord, right? So not the peripheral nervous system, but I think it's probably coming from a disc. That's my gut feeling. I could be wrong, but I do know what you're saying. That's a very good point. But that's none of those are related to your pulmonary fibrosis. Other questions, comments? 2 participants raised hand. 3 participants. Let's see. Who are they? Who's raising their hand? Okay. Norman.
Okay.
Who's talking?
Yes. This is my first time on your program.
Who's speaking?
Norman Nonkin.
Okay, go for it. Yep.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I have my screen on, but I haven't taken my shower this morning. I look like crud.
Don't worry. I was debating if I should shower or not too.
My comment first is I've really enjoyed what you're talking about. Secondly, I'm supposed to start. I got a dog too. I'm supposed to start rehab in June. Knowing that I'm going to start rehab, do you think I should wait and do my 36 weeks of rehab before I start on your program?
No. 36. Well, first of all, it's 36 sessions.
Not 36 weeks, 36
sessions. So here's why I say no, okay? Number one, you're probably going to have rehab 2 or 3 days a week, right?
2 days.
So on the other, that means 5 days of nothing, right? So there's multiple benefits to it. So I would say you could do one of 2 things. You could either do it now, because there's other stuff besides just the physical rehab. And depending upon the quality, there's a lot of variability in quality of rehab. So depending on what you learn, you may learn a lot, or you may learn almost nothing. So I would say do it simultaneously. That way, the other thing is that, again, there's huge variability in rehab. So I think, in my opinion, and of course I'm biased, but it's money back guarantee. Okay. I think what you learn from our program will help you in your rehab. And I think it will also help you be kind of hip to what's going on there if things aren't going quite as they should maybe. And I'm sorry to say that. And I don't want you to have the idea that I think I'm the only one who knows this stuff. I'm not. But I know that there are a lot of programs. And the biggest mistake that people make, more so than over-exercising people, is they under-exercise people because of their own fears. And the thing is that because rehab is limited, everybody's fighting for more visits, right? More visits. So it's like we want more containers of milk. But the idea is if each container of milk only has half a container in it, I want to fill up the rehab. So in other words, the reason why I think it would be beneficial for you now, you'll learn a whole lot. It's not so vigorous that it would interfere with your rehab. In fact, I think it would enhance it. And I think it will help you get the most out of your rehab. Again, I think most rehab places under-exercise people, especially people with pulmonary fibrosis and people with pulmonary hypertension, because it does take so much oxygen to give it to people. So one of the biggest mistakes people will make is they'll advise people to lower the workout intensity in order to stay saturated, when that makes no sense at all. In fact, it's the opposite. It's that we have to give you as much exercise, as much oxygen as possible, so that you do stay saturated, so you get the bigger workout, because it's that big giant workout that is going to help you. And the thing is that if you do it now, number one, it'll get you started before you go to rehab. You'll get more out of it. And then, you know, as things are going on during rehab, I'm happy to kind of answer questions and comment, you know, on your rehab as we go along. And a lot of times patients have this idea that, you know, I feel like I'm being under exercised, but they don't let me do this at rehab. And I say, okay, well, play them this video. And if they have any questions, call me. Because, you know, you can't argue with success, but I think it's worthwhile to do, you know, at the same time, simultaneously. And that's what we advise our patients do.
Let me ask you one more quick question.
Sure.
I wasn't really, they really didn't tell me I had IPF until late April. And at that point, or right before that, I could breathe enough and move around, and just boom. In the last few weeks, I need oxygen all the time. Is that normal that you go from nothing to needing it?
So is it normal? No. Is it common? Sometimes, okay? A lot of people have that experience. And, you know, very often you have to ask yourself, well, why did that happen? What happened in that time period? So, you know, we'd like to believe that, well, I've been less active or this or that or the other thing. But when you go from being well saturated to really having a difficult time remaining saturated at all, except without oxygen, I think there's been an incident. You know, I think there's been like a respiratory incident, whether that be an exacerbation or an infection or some reason, a progression of the disease. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I think we have to investigate what is that, because the physiology has changed, right? So the question is, why has your physiology changed? Did you get sick? Did you have a cold? Did you?
I had pneumonia in December, and I did
Okay.
have the pneumonia shot. It threw me in the hospital.
Yeah, that's it right there. So it's probably that you had an infection, you had inflammation. It takes a long time for that to go away afterwards. And the thing is, you know, I hear something a lot that I hate when I hear it. It's that people say, well, you know, you just keep getting worse and worse and worse, or people use the term new normal, okay? So if you think about it, you had the infection. So you took antibiotics, I assume. Did you take any steroids like prednisone?
Yes, I took a series for about
Okay.
7 days.
So your pneumonia is likely gone, okay? But if you think about the other parts of the sequelae that happened during that, you were in the hospital, you were inactive, right? You were not doing much. You were doing everything to recover from that pneumonia. And that could potentially be what you're fighting right now. You could have, you know, you could have had a progression of your disease as a result of the pneumonia. But again, right now, do all the things. How much oxygen are you on?
On one of the machines, the carry kind, I'm on number 2 to number 3.
Okay, so let's start with that. So we're talking about portable oxygen concentrators, right? That's another hot topic, and I recently did a 2-hour webinar on that, which I can send to Bill and post for you, okay? One of the biggest misconceptions about portable oxygen is that those numbers are in liters per minute, right? So if you're using a plug-in concentrator that's plugged into the wall, that's in liters per minute. If you're using a tank, that's in liters per minute. If you're using a portable oxygen concentrator on pulse, that is not liters per minute. Those are settings by the company, okay? And the thing is that they're minuscule in terms of how much oxygen you're getting. If you look, I recently wrote an article with somebody who I think is super smart when it comes to oxygen. 2 people who are really smart. One is Mark Mangus, who's a respiratory therapist. The other is Ryan Deesum, who's like a superstar of oxygen equipment. It's called Oxygen Manifesto, and it was in the Pulmonary Fibrosis News. And we talk about all this. And, you know, to make sure, for pulmonary fibrosis and the interstitial lung diseases, in a lot of cases, those portable devices don't work well enough. They don't give you even remotely close to enough oxygen. And if you look at the guide in the pulmonary paper, what you'll find is that people say, well, this one goes from 1 to 5, and this one goes from 1 to 6. And that doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't mean anything. Those are just numbers and settings. But if you look at the total oxygen produced, you'll find that very often it's not even a liter of oxygen per minute. So there's no way that that's going to keep you saturated. Now, here's a little secret, okay? I am working on a project. It's going to be the Manhattan Project of oxygen, where we're going to be, hopefully, if this works, having something where you can have your oxygen sensed automatically and adjusted automatically, okay, based on your needs. So it's like a scuba computer where, like, if you go down, it measures it and makes the adjustment. If that comes, that's going to be a miracle. But again, with interstitial lung disease, you have to realize that the oxygen demands are high, okay? And the thing I say to you is don't worry about the number of the machine. Rely on your instruments, right? And if your saturation is low, turn it all the way up. And if your machine on its maximum is not able to keep you saturated, then you need a different machine. And sometimes you need a tank, okay? The toughest person I know with pulmonary fibrosis who recently passed away was one of my patients named Sylvia. And she was the only person who ever really did what some people need to do, which is that she would come to rehab with a cart with 6 to 8 tanks of oxygen in it and using a mask. And sometimes that's what it takes, because with ILD, very often you need a lot of oxygen, and the average portable concentrator will not allow you to get enough. So rely on your instruments to tell you if that's good enough or not. If you're in the 80s or worse, then you need a different device. I've just been given the flashing light, which means my set is almost over. I'll take 2 more questions if they're still there, from Kill and Ed. Kill.
Yeah, I've got a question about, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. So I had a question about, right from where you left off, I'm a high oxygen need user. I need it with exertion. I'm a lifelong runner, and I've, tried to maintain that through this disease. I need 10 to 15 liters of oxygen when I'm running. And I use a rebreather mask, which you recommended to me. Thank you so much for that recommendation.
Yep.
It's been very helpful. What I find sometimes is when I try to push myself and go a little bit harder, I find that even though my oxygen sats are good, I feel like I'm still gasping for breath sometimes.
Right. So that's 2 separate things. So there's oxygen saturation, right? And then there's the mechanical movement of air. So if your sats are good, I would go with it. And that's what we do with a lot of patients. We put them on a mask, we'll give them 10 to 15 liters of oxygen, and yeah, they're going to be short of breath. Because you're an athlete, okay, it's going to happen at high levels of activity, but again, rely on your instruments for better and for worse. So in other words, if your saturation is good, even if you're short of breath and your heart rate is good, go for it. Push yourself. That's how you're going to get stronger. But do it in short spurts. So in other words, if think of it not as this one workout. Think of it as like a 30-day plan, right? So you run, and I assume you mean like you'll pick up the speed a little bit, or you'll go with so let's say, for argument's sake, do you have like a set time at which it gets hard for you? Like after how long of that increased intensity?
Yeah, it'll be a few minutes.
Okay, so what I would say is cut back on the time. So let's say it happens at 5 minutes. Let's say you could push yourself for 5 minutes and then you're just gasping for air, right? What I would do is I would start interspersing, let's say 3 minutes of that, cut back to normal, okay? 3 minutes of that, cut back to normal. 3 minutes of that, cut back to normal. 3 runs in the course of your overall run, right? And then as you feel up to it, 3.5 minutes, 3.5 minutes, 3.5 minutes. And not only is that going to make you fitter and help you maintain your fitness, I also believe that that's how you improve lung function.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the other thing is, you know, when I start gasping for breath, my chest actually fatigues a little bit. It almost feels like, you know, it's becoming work to breathe. Does that,
Okay,
what is that
so
saying?
that's a tricky thing there, okay? Because between the neck and the belt, we have the cardiovascular system, the pulmonary system, and the GI system, right? And a lot of times, the systems and the symptoms can be very similar, right? So in a situation like that, and a lot of times what I see is that patients who, again, have always had every symptom attributed to respiratory disease, where they say, I feel this pressure in my chest. No, that's your COPD. No, that's your pulmonary hypertension. No, that's your pulmonary fibrosis, right? But sometimes it can be heart disease. So have you been worked up for heart disease?
I have, yeah.
Recently and very well?
About 5 months ago, and yes.
What did you have done? Did you have a stress echo?
Yeah, I was getting ready for a biopsy and some other procedures. So yeah, they did a full cardio workup on me.
Then I would say don't. If you know your heart is clean, then go for it. Push yourself.
Okay, thanks.
If your numbers are good and you know your heart is clean, then push yourself. If you've never been worked up heart wise, then yeah, you should have it checked. But if not, that's how you improve. We expect you to get short of breath during the workouts. You know what I mean? Like during rehab, like you should always be short of breath at rehab. Why? Because as you get stronger, we're going to increase the intensity. So that means at the highest level, you should always be short of breath. If you're going to rehab and you're not getting short of breath, or you get stronger and therefore you're no longer short of breath at the same level, you need to increase the intensity. And if people aren't pushing you like that, again, it's often the own fear of the clinicians, or a lack of attention to the detail, you know, because a lot of times you go into rehab and there may be 5 or 6 or more patients with 1 or 2 clinicians, but you need to push yourself if you expect to have success. Do we have time for one more question?
One more question. Ed is online, patiently waiting, and after Ed's done, we're going to close down, Noah.
Okay, go for it, Ed.
One last question. Do you see anybody have their pulmonary function tests improve after rehab?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How much do you see?
What?
Like how much? Like 10%, 20%?
Well, it's a little bit. I've seen more improvement with COPD. I've seen more improvement with pulmonary hypertension. But I've seen people have 7 to 10% improvements. But let me tell you one other thing, okay? When it comes to pulmonary function, okay, number one, I think that the key to improvement, if possible, I don't think everybody's going to improve. I don't think everybody has the ability to improve their lung function. But I think if you're going to improve, the key is going to be vigorous exercise up to the point that Gil is describing, where you do get short of breath as long as your oxygen, heart rate, and blood pressure are okay. But what I tell people is if I see somebody a year later and their pulmonary function is the same, meaning there's been no decline, that's a victory, okay? So you know what? If you get a point, 2 points, 3 points, 5 points, so be it. Because again, it's not just pulmonary function that determines how well or how poorly we breathe. There's many, many factors. And the way I say it over and over again is that breathing is multifactorial. And that's why, you know, we talked about before, somebody said, oh, my doctor doesn't, you know, a lot of Western medicine in particular, 80% of it or more, if not 100% of it, is medication-based. Medication is part of it, but medication is 20% of it, okay? It's not 80%. And the other 80% is the exercise, the nutrition, the stress management, and then making sure you don't get sick through washing your hands a lot, wearing a mask when you're going to be exposed. Don't hang around sick people. You know, when you go on a plane, protect yourself. I used to get sick almost every time I fly. Now I take those wipes, I wipe down my seat, I wipe down my armor. I haven't gotten sick since I do it. And trust me, I've spoken to a lot of people on flights who work on them. They don't ever clean those seats. I've cleaned some of those seats. That thing comes off black, okay? So protect yourself. But 20% of it is medication. okay? The medication's the stopgap for pulmonary fibrosis. Right now, don't expect the medication to make you feel better. It's like people start one of either Ofev or Esbriet, and they say, I don't feel any better, okay? That's not gonna make you feel better, but if that holds your ground, right? And now you can exercise more and eat better and manage your stress, that's what's gonna make you feel better. We just want something that's not gonna cause this plummet of pulmonary function due to fibrosis. That's the problem, is that, you know, it takes off fast and it's you know, it gets running. And so the key, in my opinion, it's like HIV. At one time, if you were diagnosed with HIV, you were smoked, okay? Now people live, you know, they live almost, you know, perfect lives with HIV. If we could get something that will stop the fibrotic changes while at the same time not making you feel sick in a way that makes you question whether or not it's worth it, that's a huge compromise and that's a huge benefit. But it's this lifestyle stuff, trust me, if you're not exercising every day, if you're not watching what you eat and maintaining your weight, if you're not meditating and managing your stress, and you're not washing your hands after you go to the bathroom or shaking hands with people or this and that, then don't talk to me about any of the other stuff, okay? That's my one little bit of tough love for the talk, because again, don't look for the peppermint and the curcumin and all these things. And I'm not telling you not to do those things, but don't do those things if you're not exercising, if you're not eating a basic healthy diet, and if you're not managing your stress and anxiety. That's a good place to end, I think.
Noah, I have to tell you, as I often do, wonderful, wonderful words of wisdom. I think we all took something away from this. For those here, this will be live on our Facebook private site for the PF Warriors on Facebook. And again, Noah, thank you so much. It's been like every time you do something with us, you can't hear all the applause, but I can tell you it's resounding out there. We all appreciate what you do. Thank you.
You can unmute everybody. That's how we end all our meetings. If anyone wants to say anything right now, you're
all right. Yeah.
Thank you. Guys, it was
very
a
much.
great morning.
Thank you very much.
You know, really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you guys again.
Bye.
All right, take care.